All right, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Hey there, students. Tom Richey here, and we are here on YouTube and on Crowdcast to go over Unit 5. All right, so Unit 5, 1844 to 1877. Now, the first thing I want to do is make sure that we have a copy of our review guide for Unit 5. Okay, so our Unit 5 review guide is available here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and post that in the chats, and so y'all can have access to that. And again, this is a two-pager, basically going into the brass tacks of these different units. Okay, so we're going to go and get that out there, and let's see what happens. All right, so we're going to put that there. I'm going to pin that in the YouTube chat just in case anybody wants to show up there. And so let's go ahead and kind of get into it. Now, remember, if you're on Crowdcast, as far as every unit study guide, wow, all caps. I'm very, okay, MCC likes the study guide. Yeah, compact and tidy. I try to, to do what I can. Now, just to let y'all know, this is something that's in progress. So if you Google Tom Richey APUSH review guide, Unit 3, Unit 4, Unit 5, Unit 6, okay? So I have these for Units 3 through 6. And so as far, I would love that too, Ash. If I could just like add my Harry Potter wand, there we go. So yes, well, your teacher loves them, Cadence. I'm glad to hear that because my plan is for your teacher to have a full set next year. I know that's not going to help you right now, but at least it'll help you right now to have the 4 that I've finished. And my plan is to get other stuff out there. But Ash, I'm so glad that you're saying good things. Aria, I agree. You can do this. So let's just focus on the fact that we do have a review guide for Unit 5. Remember, I will be making occasional shout outs for new Instagram and TikTok followers. So make sure y'all know, I mean, that's always Tom Richey. And let's go ahead and take a look at our unit guide. Okay, so this unit starts with the westward expansion of the United States. Now, we want to remember, reaching back into Unit 4, the way that Unit 4 ends, has the Missouri Compromise, right, in 1820. And the Missouri Compromise was a pretty durable compromise about the sectional expansion of slavery, right? But at the same time, this is something that when we're looking at, that it was just for the Louisiana Purchase. The 3630 line was just applying to the Louisiana Purchase. And so one of the things when we're thinking about westward expansion, it's a major topic in its own right, but it's also something that leads to additional sectional conflict between the North and the South. And this starts with the independence of Texas in 1836. Now, one thing that we'll note is at the very first, the United States, when Texas in 1836 says, hey, we're independent, we want to be annexed into the United States. Now, 2 words that I think are very helpful for Unit 5 are secession and annexation. Now, secession is when a smaller political community leaves, separates itself from a larger political community, and typically without the consent of the larger political community. So a secession, when Texas seceded from Mexico, Mexico did not approve that. Texas just said they're independent. Now, if we think back to the Declaration of Independence, the 13 colonies seceded from Britain, okay? So they declared themselves independent, that they were no longer part of Britain. New TikTok followers, thank you, Eloise, John Cuevas _ the third, Naya, Neha, and CJ and Lila and Margot. Thank y'all so much for the recent follows there. And so annexation is when a larger political unit absorbs a smaller political unit. So Texas, they seceded from Mexico and they wanted to be annexed into the United States. Now in the 1830s, the United States isn't real crazy about the idea of doing that because, Mexico is our neighbor and it's not really neighborly behavior. It's like, if I had a neighbor that had a kid or something like that, and that kid, came over to my house and said, I want to live here. That wouldn't be a very good thing if I were like, oh, okay, you can live here. That wouldn't be very neighborly. And so the United States is really not feeling the annexation thing during the 1830s. But then in the 1840s, we have this wave of manifest destiny. Now, hopefully, you've seen this picture here many times during the year, okay? That it's one of those pictures that we associate with manifest destiny. Now, your generation has this idea of manifesting things, right? You just, if I manifest it for long enough, it's gonna come true. But in this sense, manifest is something that's clear or obvious. I can tell in the chat, it's obvious that a lot of you are going to be making fours, fives. It's also maybe manifest that not all of you are going to make fours and fives. So you might want to make sure to make use of this time that we have to study and make sure you're paying close attention to your teacher in class tomorrow. So with this manifest destiny, now when we talk about destiny, you're destined, like this is something that usually is the result of a higher power, getting involved, right? A higher power. And we're thinking in terms of, okay, that, this idea of I'm destined for this. If you say I'm destined to get a five, it's just, God meant for me to do that ever since, right? So with that, in the 1840s, the United States, like Americans, start thinking in terms of it is our manifest destiny to pretty much control as much of the North American continent as we can. And so James K. Polk, now remember to ask your questions, those of you in the crowdcast, ask your questions, on that tab. Go to the Q&A tab. And if you like a question that someone else has asked, upvote it. I'm going to use this manifest destiny bit to kind of introduce us. And then after that, I'll see what are our questions about the Civil War and Reconstruction and the road to Civil War and all that. So, however, manifest destiny, James K. Polk, 1844. That's why this starts. Now, one thing I want to make clear, I was telling somebody on the TikToks that somebody said something about Unit 4, Unit 5, and I was like, well, you got the wrong unit, but it's not necessarily, okay? You got the wrong unit, but, it doesn't matter so much because as far as that goes, that, if you've got the wrong unit, the exam doesn't ever mention unit numbers, okay? So remember that you don't need to know Unit 4, Unit 5, that kind of thing. The exam never uses that kind of language. So 1844, that's what you need to kind of be aware of, okay? James K. Polk wins the election, and the following year, Texas is annexed into the United States by joint resolution of Congress. And so with that, the annexation of Texas is the direct cause of the Mexican-American War, okay? The annexation of Texas is the direct cause of the Mexican-American War. So when we look at the Mexican-American War, again, caused by the annexation of Texas, and we go to Mexico, go to war with Mexico because we want to defend Texas land claims, which go all the way to the Rio Grande River. All right, so that's going to go all the way to the Rio Grande, which Mexico was at some point prepared to recognize Texas independence if they would accept a smaller Texas. But as they say, everything's bigger in Texas, right? So in 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo offered few protections to Mexicans and American Indians who lived in the ceded territory. That's in the course and exam description. So the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is the treaty that ends the Mexican-American War. We throw in another 15 million. We like something about that 15 million number. It's the same thing we paid for the Louisiana Purchase. But we don't buy it like we did from France, right? The Mexican cession is something that Mexico is kind of forced to sell it to us as part of the treaty. And so the Mexican cession, which is basically the southwestern United States, California, includes Nevada and Utah. As far as that goes, we'll note that the United States gets sovereignty there, but then again, there were already people living there as well. So that's something that, we're thinking about manifest destiny of the Mexican-American War. Now, I'm working on a little something, it seems like the people on the TikToks, they like to hear me rap. I'm not a rapper, but the people on the TikToks, they like to hear me rap. So I'm kind of working on something as far as that goes. Now one thing that I want to note as well is that after this, I'm going to be shutting down this session at about 8:55 because at 9 we're going to be having a multiple choice strategy session that I'm doing in partnership with my friends at Albert IO. I'm going to make sure y'all got the link here. I'm not going to be putting this on YouTube. It's just going to be on Crowdcast. So I want you to do that. So with that, let me see the MC strategy section. So that's going to be something. It's a free session. I'm not charging anything for it, but it's something where we're going to be, just going over, some points of your multiple choice strategy. So that's going to be the focus of that. Somebody was saying, rap, spit, all that kind of stuff. Now there's this. Let me see if I can find. Let's see. So let me see. Y'all want to see something I'm working on? So I just started looking at this earlier. Let's see, instrumental, because I'm gonna have to find that. But it's let me try this with this sexy red beat, and trying to put something together for Manifest Destiny. Okay, so they love these like 30-second raps on the TikToks. Let me see. I don't know. Y'all might not want to hear something I'm working on informally, but I'm gonna put that anyway. All right, somebody's gonna have to actually. I think it's SEXYY per Arthana, not SEXXY. But yeah, so as far as that goes, now somebody's got to explain that little together, everyone achieves more. And are y'all planning on writing that on your exam or something like that? I'm seeing it a lot. Okay, so let's take a look. Just working on it, okay? Let's see. It's a process. We're making progress. Destined for the West. This is manifest. It's a process. We're making progress. Destined for the West. This is manifest. Protects us from the Mexicans. We're making war yet again. We want the Southwest. We're going to take it when we win. Guadalupe hit Doggo into the treaty when it ends. 1848, same year the gold rush was the trend. All right. But anyway, working on that right now. So that's just something like that's all I've got written down right now. I probably need a few more bars to put it on the TikToks, but I think I'm gonna put it out there. Okay, so what's that? He's doing the thing. What is the thing? All right, so that's something. But I'm gonna be working on that, and so y'all just be sure to watch for that on the TikToks. All right. So y'all make sure to watch for that on the TikToks. So yeah, but that's a little Manifest Destiny rap that I'm trying to put together. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So going from there, just take a look for that. Maybe it'll drop later tonight or something like that. So going from that, let's go ahead and look at the questions. Let's see what the questions are right now. Are there any acronyms that can help us remember important events? Okay. Now, Reese, I need to come up with more of these. One of the things I would say nowadays, ask Chat GPT what chat. I mean, the thing is, the way that the AI thinks might, who knows? I mean, if it's helpful. Remember, last night I said NIP, for the American system, National Bank, internal improvements, protective tariff. Okay. So I was saying that for the American system, I don't know if I've really necessarily got anything for this period. So I think I'm going to have to say maybe not. But if I think of something that I would know now, one thing I would say though, SUCCESS. That's the way we spell. That's the way we spell success. SECEDE. That's the way we spell secede. Now, I'm going to make it clear. APUSH doesn't count off for spelling, okay? But it's so funny when you see like that the Confederate States succeeded from the Union. Like I always laugh at the person writing that whenever I see it. So I think SECEDE That's the way we spell secede. So secession, not succession. They don't succeed from the Union, they secede from the Union. Okay. So as far as that goes, that's what I'm working on there. Now, what specific battles or events? Okay. So Annabelle, you ask a great question here, because as far as that goes, the specific events and battles, the Civil War is so interesting, but at the same time, there's really not a whole lot of need to know stuff about the battle parts of the war. Okay, so you'll notice that I mentioned a few things here in the guide, and I put them in I put them in red there. Okay. So, as far as I would note here, now, one of the things that we should note is that the Union, okay, and this is one of those things that the Union had incredible, advantages as far as material advantages of the Union. Okay. This is something that is a let's see, I'm going to go ahead and put this up in front of you in hopes that it might stick, because I think that it makes a lot of difference when you see it. Okay. So what we're going to look at here is when we think about the material advantages of the Union versus the Confederacy, that for every person you have in the South, okay, especially if we're thinking about the free population, the North double the size of the population. Okay, so the North has a 2-to-1. The North, or the Union, has a 2-to-1 population advantage. Now, the South, they've got plenty of places to grow crops. The South never really has trouble feeding their people, so to speak. As far as just the the raw farming element. But one of the things, in war, you need men, you need money, you need machinery, right? And so, as far as that goes, manufacturing workers, this goes all the way back to Jefferson versus Hamilton, right? So, when we think about manufacturing workers, for every person in the South who had a job in the manufacturing sector, 6 people in the North. Now, that's where we're thinking about guns, about cannons, about all of these things that you need, wagons for the armies. There are so many things that you need there, manufacturing establishments, that this is 6-to-1 in manufacturing. And so then bank capital, okay, which, remember that typically your anti-bank people, the people who didn't think that there should be a national bank, Jefferson and Madison in the 1790s, Andrew Jackson in the 1830s, that they didn't like central banking. Now, all of these guys were plantation owners. And the thing is, if you're a plantation owner, a plantation is a business, but it's one of those things where even if somebody owns a large plantation, they can go to the bank, they can take out a loan against next year, against next spring's crop or the fall crop or whenever that is. I'm not a farmer, but I don't know exactly when they harvest this or that or the other. I just see sometimes I drive by and the crops are growing, and then I drive by the next week and the crops aren't there anymore. And so, as far as that goes, that they can just go to the local bank and they can say, I need a loan. I'll pay it back when I'm able to sell this the next season's crop. And then it's like, okay. But if I want to build a factory, then I need a lot of capital. Okay. It's not the sort of thing that if I wanted to build a factory, I just go to my local bank and say, hey, I got this thing in mind I want to build. It's called a factory. Okay. You need big banks in order to finance that kind of business enterprise. And so the North, was able to borrow more money because war puts you in debt. And so, the Confederates were outnumbered. They, they didn't have, they had a fraction of the manufacturing than the bank capital. So it's very important to understand that these material advantages are one of the most important explanations for why the Union won the Civil War. Now, note that the South was not necessarily without advantages, okay, especially early in the war. Now, the Union did, find Lincoln eventually found capable generals who would do the kind of thing he wanted them to do, but especially at the beginning of the war, there was, a common belief that the South had an edge in terms of military leadership. Now, you don't necessarily need to know who Robert E. Lee or Stonewall Jackson were, strictly speaking, but I think that most people who are, just conversant in the Civil War would at least, know who one of those people, was. They're in the South. They know the terrain and the land. Their supply lines don't have to go as far. The South did not have to defeat the North. This is one of those things we could make a comparison. Some questions will ask us to make comparisons between periods. When we think about the Vietnam War, okay, when you put like the United States versus the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, these are just a fraction, okay? The United States had more manpower. The United States had better technology. The United States had more money. The United States had all of those material advantages, but all Charlie had to do in the Vietnam War is drain away the public support and our will to fight. So we'll note here that the United States did not lose the Vietnam War because Charlie had advantages over us. The United States lost the Vietnam War because the American public turned against it. That by the time you get to 1968, there just isn't the support necessary to fight the war. And so one of the things, when you look at what the Confederacy had to do, they only had to get the Union to the point where they say, you know what, this isn't worth it, we're going home. Okay, so that's something that I think is, that is important. And one thing that we'll note here is that, the Union needed, the Union could fight a long war of attrition, okay? A war of attrition, which is basically what Grant's doing, is taking advantage of those material advantages and basically saying, look, we can do this all day. I mean, Lee and Grant both took a lot of casualties in a lot of battles, but the difference was, you get to the point after the Battle of Gettysburg, okay? So I think that, Antietam and Gettysburg, if you're thinking about what are some Civil War battles that would be important for me to know, I would say that Antietam, which is on one hand the bloodiest single day of the war, that's kind of a bit of trivia, but it was kind of a military draw. Now we want to note that Lee's Army of Northern Virginia won many victories, especially early in the war. Okay, won many victories early in the war, especially, but there was a certain point where when we look at this, that Antietam, Lee and McClellan basically fought to a draw, and that's the point in 1862, late 1862, Abraham Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation, I would say, is the single most important thing to understand for understanding the Civil War. That, before September of 1862, and in fact, that's when he announced it, it didn't take effect until 100 days later, January 1st, 1863. So 1861 and 1862, Lincoln's fighting a limited war to preserve the Union. And what we want to remember here is that before the war, Lincoln was a free soiler, okay? So we want to note, this idea of free soil politicians, okay? Yeah, there we go. So free soilers, these are people who oppose the expansion of slavery, but not necessarily slavery in the South, okay? One thing that you'll find, one of these kind of, I hate to say that term sometimes when you think like throughout history, human beings have a very, like an uncanny ability to not care about things that are going on if they're not in their line of sight, out of mind. So, when we think about like our iPhones, for example, that what do we end up paying somewhere between $800 and $1,500 depending on the bells and whistles? Well, if we wanted to make the iPhones in the United States, I've seen cost estimates, they could cost twice that. They could cost $3,000. Now, Americans don't want to pay that much for their iPhones, and we really don't want to know what is going on in those factories in China where our iPhones are made. We'd rather just kind of not think about that. So free soilers, they said, look, we understand that getting rid of slavery would mess up the economy. And, those are states, remember that before the Civil War, and that's a big turning point of the Civil War, is that Lincoln in the Civil War talks about the United States as a nation. And before the Civil War, a lot of people thought about it in terms of much more of a union of states. And so, therefore, well, the southern states have slavery. That's their right to do that. I don't agree with it, but, that's their right to do it. And so free soilers, they didn't want to be around slavery. They didn't want to compete with slavery. A lot of free soilers were downright racist. So we want to understand the free soilers, while they're an anti-slavery faction, it's not the same kind of anti-slavery as abolitionists. Abolitionists say, we want to get rid of slavery now. We want to get rid of slavery throughout the United States, and we don't want to pay a dime to compensate slaveholders. The free soilers had a more nuanced kind of view of that. So Lincoln, before the Civil War, was a free soiler who would have supported things such as the Wilmot Proviso. So after the Mexican-American, or actually it was introduced during technically, but basically the Wilmot Proviso was a congressional proposal that never became law, but still kind of threw down the gauntlet, so to speak, that said that no territory taken from Mexico will be open to slavery. So this is one thing we think about the Mexican-American War as a major turning point, that we see that the slavery issue, which had previously been settled by the Missouri Compromise, now there's this whole big chunk of land where the slavery issue can be fought over again. And so the Wilmot Proviso says we want to ban it there. And then, of course, there's the Compromise of 1850. Now, I will tell you, I've got a full lecture on the Compromise of 1850. If you don't want to watch the lecture, you can type in Compromise of 1850 lecture notes, okay? And I've got a set of notes on my website. Go ahead and look that up. But the Compromise of 1850, it's Henry Clay's last compromise. And again, that is admitting California as a free state. That's something for the North. In return, to get some support from senators from the Upper South, then there is the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which is a stronger Fugitive Slave Act than the 1793 Act it replaced. So with that, now the other thing is it introduces this new way to deal with slavery in the territories that they referred to as popular sovereignty, okay? Basically saying that instead of Congress deciding the status of slavery, let the settlers decide the status of slavery. So once people settle in the territory and there are enough of them to set up a formal kind of territorial government, they can decide, do they want to have a territory open to slavery, or they want to have territory closed to slavery. So that's what we see there, okay, this idea of popular sovereignty. But again, we want to note the free soilers and then the abolitionists. And so with that, we see here that the Kansas-Nebraska Act, okay, this is a big deal here. I've got another lecture, kind of an informal lecture, but I think it's very helpful if you just type in Tom Richey Bleeding Kansas. I go through that whole thing with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which then introduced popular sovereignty into Kansas and Nebraska, which were north of 3630. And this is where you see the demise of the first two-party system, okay? So with that, but again, these specific events, battles from the Civil War, you've got Antietam, which produced the Emancipation Proclamation. Now note, Lincoln in the Emancipation Proclamation only proclaimed enslaved people in Confederate-held areas to be free. Remember, he didn't think he had any power in the border states. Not every slave state seceded. Kentucky, Missouri, Delaware, and Maryland stayed in the Union. So Lincoln still had, these border states that were slave states that were still in the North. So slavery in Kentucky and even Tennessee, by the time Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the Union controlled Tennessee. So he exempted Tennessee, he exempted Southeast Louisiana, where the Union had taken New Orleans, and he exempted some parts of coastal Tidewater Virginia. basically Lincoln in the Emancipation Proclamation, he said, that it's a matter, it's a necessary war measure. Lincoln was freeing enslaved people as the commander in chief, okay, as the commander in chief, not as not as any other thing. He's saying, look, it's a necessary war measure. And so it's basically in Confederate held areas, and it wasn't something that generally got rid of slavery. That was the 13th Amendment, which was added to the Constitution immediately after the Civil War. So hopefully that answers your question, Annabelle. And when we think about the importance beliefs of the Whigs versus the Democrats, now this is the second two-party system, which falls apart with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So we want to understand that that second two-party system that we discussed yesterday when we were discussing Unit 4, the Whigs versus the Democrats, that basically, remember, the Democrats are saying that they are strict constructionists, states' rights. They believe in a laissez-faire kind of mentality. They don't like the American system. They don't like a national bank. They don't like federal funding for internal improvements. The state of New York, they built the Erie Canal all by themselves. So why is it that other states can't do the same thing? Like when Henry Clay, with the American system, the Whigs want loose construction, government funding for economic development, all of these things here, right? So, as far as that, Henry Clay and the Whig Party, that they believe in the American system, okay? National bank, internal improvements, protective tariff. Now, this was a big conflict in the decades leading to the Civil War. We got things like the nullification crisis, Jackson's bank veto, the Maysville Road veto. But again, the Kansas-Nebraska Act basically makes the Whig Party fall apart because the northern faction of the Whig Party was free soil / abolitionist, depending on the individual. The southern faction of the Whig Party favored the westward expansion of slavery. And so since in the 1850s, the westward expansion of slavery is the political issue, that system fell apart. And the Republican Party, same one as we've got today, we don't have to put anything in front of it like Jefferson's party. That party was founded in 1854 in response to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And the Republican Party founded itself as a sectional party. They realized that, hey, the North has more people now. Okay. And the North, basically, they figured out that because of, immigration from Ireland and Germany and natural population increases, the northern states, the northern free states, had enough electoral votes that if a sectional party could get all or nearly all of the free state votes, you could elect a president. Now, somebody's still asking about the Whigs and the Democrats. Do we want, I probably should practice one more time because we'll probably have a little bit more of a crowd tomorrow night. Do y'all want to hear Whig Party Free one more time, or do we want to, do we want to just kind of skip that tonight and bring that tomorrow? Oh, you know what? Migration. Okay, watch this. Now, remember, don't predict the DBQ, just cook it no matter what. Tom Richey, APUSH, immigration review. Okay, so as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, if you will Google Tom Richey, APUSH immigration review, I want you to see this. I made some years ago a 2-pager. I don't think it's quite as professional looking as the one that I have now for this unit. Maybe I'll spice it up a little bit later, but here's a little 2-pager. Oh, whoops. I went to the APUS history. All right. So with that, there we go. Okay. So APUSH immigration review. Okay. So basically we go all the way back here and here, the antebellum period. Okay, Indian removal, Anglo-American settlers going to Texas. And then now, of course, the conclave is oh, you know what? I haven't looked. Is there a new pope? Black smoke. Okay, so the first, we do see black smoke. Okay, so basically they have first vote. They voted for the first time today. They're in the conclave. Now, as far as that goes, that that most American Protestants at this time, were in the United States before the 1840s was overwhelmingly Protestant, like 90% plus. So the thing is that the first wave of Catholic immigration came in between 1845 and 1855. And so we see this, that you've got Irish and German immigrants coming in. And now the Germans, most German Americans that are still in touch with their roots tend to be Lutheran, the majority, but there are also a lot of German Catholics, because if you studied the Reformation in Germany, it was basically, in the Holy Roman Empire, it was regional, okay? So, but practically all of the Irish were Catholics, so they were not exactly welcomed with open arms. Remember, nativism is a word that comes up a good bit on the exam, whether for this period or for the 1920s or other periods, where basically nativism, it just says, hey, we got too many immigrants. We need less of them. Okay. That's nativism. We got too many immigrants. We need less of them. All right. So that's one of those things that we see at that time. So Irish and German immigration. And then I go into the progressive era with the new immigrants. Post World War I, you got that interwar period. Then, of course, contemporary America. So I go all the way through on this two-pager, all the way to the Sun Belt migrations. So as far as that goes, just make sure that you know that resource is there. Just type in Tom Richey APUSH Immigration Review. Okay. So as far as that goes, we'll make a note of that. So going from there, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you what, together everyone achieves more on May whatever, right? May 9th, I think. All right. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, let's see. So with this, okay, where to put HIP in your DBQ? Noah, it's 2 nights. It's 2 nights before the exam. That really should be integrated in the body paragraphs. But here's the thing. I really think that, and I tell people this every year, that when we're within a day or two of the DBQ, you really want to think in terms. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a chat. Let's have a chat. Now, as far as that goes, I don't think it helps you to think about how much you need to get right to pass. Okay. Like you can get around half right if you're a good writer, all of that kind of stuff. Okay. But as far as that goes, that like you need to be thinking about how can I get as many points as I can. Now, the other side, you want to be realistic. Okay. You want to be realistic on the other side of this, because on the other side of this, that when people are asking me about HIP analysis, which is a point that the majority of people don't earn. Now, 73% of people pass, and only about 43% get either the HIP or the complex understanding. So let's think about this, that 70% plus pass, around a little bit over 40% get the HIP analysis. I would not be thinking about like trying to do that point now if I don't know how to do it. Okay. It takes practice. So if I were to tell somebody one to pass, try to get about, just to be on the safe side, about 35 right out of 55. Now, I've seen people get 28 right and pass. I've seen people get 28 right on the test and pass, but they're stronger writers. So I would say, to be on the safe side, 33 to 35. I would say you're trying to get 3 out of 5 right, but you might not need that, but 3 out of 5 right, that would be something good to go for. Then like 4 or 5 out of 9 on the SAQ. And then if you could get a 3, preferably a 4 on the DBQ, then great. And then like a 2 or 3 on the LEQ, just depending. I mean, that's one of those scenarios where I'm thinking kind of bare minimum. So as far as that goes, Don, I agree with you, okay, that I'm going to, and here's the other thing. Here's why your teacher's right, is that if your gut doesn't tell you, if your gut's not giving you good advice on the multiple choice test, you have no chance of passing anyway, okay? That really, if your gut's not serving you, there's no way you're going to pass anyway. So if you've got what you need to pass, then you might as well trust yourself, okay? So just with that, what we want to understand, oh, that's great, Don, correcting your mechanics there. I like that. A sign of class. All right, so with that, what I would tell y'all here, quit trying to to think about how many points you need. Okay. Think about how much can you do between now and then to increase your chances of passing. Okay. You're wasting time if you're thinking about things. So here's the thing. Yeah. YOU apostrophe RE, but yes, Nathan. Okay. Yeah. If your gut is wrong, you're cooked. If your gut is right, you cook. Okay. If your gut is right, you cook. If your gut is wrong, you're cooked. So as far as that goes, yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. You're asking this. The best strategy to get a 6 out of 6 on the DBQ is for you to have gotten 6 out of 6 on the DBQ on multiple DBQs already. Okay. So with that, I would say that the most important thing you can do from this point on is your content review. Okay. That's something that I think that that you want to think about, is considering that. Okay. So that's something, but content review, and not getting too deep in the weeds. Okay. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's save this for the multiple choice strategy session. I'm going to be saying that. Yeah. So the thing is, Cadence, like in your case, you've gotten 6 out of 6 on 4 or 5 practice DBQs, or 6 out of 6 LEQs, whatever. But the other thing to remember, you don't need HIP analysis or complexity in order to pass the exam, even to make a 4, possibly to make a 5. Okay. Like if you, so the thing is, don't focus on the points on the DBQ or LEQ that the majority of people don't score. Okay. That's something that it's just not a good allocation of your resources, which are very scarce right now. So with that, speaking of content review, which I think is very important here, let's think about as far as, okay, so women's movement. Let's talk about this. We mentioned this yesterday, okay? So as far as that goes, when we think about the Seneca Falls Declaration, the Seneca Falls Declaration in 1848 is saying, look, all of these illiterate, unlettered, unpropertied white men have gotten the right to vote. And we, the middle-class white women of this country, have been passed over. And that is wrong, okay? Now, the 15th Amendment, when we think about the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th Amendment, which was supported by Abraham Lincoln, was to abolish slavery. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. Now, I always ask students, as far as that goes, what has, what did the 13th Amendment do? It abolished slavery. What else did the 13th Amendment do? Nothing. Nothing else. Okay. So as far as that goes, just think about that. 13th Amendment abolished slavery. And that's pretty much Lincoln's goals for winning the war were preserve the Union, put the Union back together, and then abolish slavery. Now, Lincoln didn't plan to micromanage how the states went about doing that. Lincoln was kind of a quit while you're ahead kind of person. So as far as that goes, the radical Republicans, they pushed through the 14th and 15th Amendments. Okay, the 14th Amendment, which is a big deal when you get to AP government next year, those of you who are taking that. The 14th Amendment guarantees every American the equal protection of the laws. All right. And then the 15th Amendment says that the right to vote, cannot be denied because of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Okay. So this is one of those things that, okay, the 14th Amendment says equal protection of the laws. Everybody's equal in this country. 15th Amendment says you can't tell somebody they can't vote because of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Well, what did the 15th Amendment forget? It forgot women. Actually, it didn't forget. It's one of those things that they didn't forget. They just didn't include women. And a lot of feminists, such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they were really, really upset about that. They were really upset. And again, these people who just got freed from slavery, people who, most of them didn't know how to read, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton has to hear they've got the right to vote and you don't. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton was not happy. She said some things that today would be considered really offensive. And so, well, actually, whoa. No. The 13th Amendment was part of Reconstruction. So Reconstruction is anything that has to do with getting the country back together after the Civil War. So the difference is the 14th and 15th Amendment were the beginning of what they call radical or congressional Reconstruction. So Reconstruction began, I mean, Lincoln announced a proclamation of Reconstruction as early as 1863. So some of this, where you got that. So going from that, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that we want to note, that the women's movement didn't really receive what they wanted. They didn't get the right to vote as a result of Reconstruction. Now, what they did get, there were a lot of state constitutions that amended to where women could have a bank account, and they could have, married women could have a bank account, some of their own assets, which they didn't get from the, from that. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, I think Cadence is giving some good advice. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you want, let me go over, since some of y'all, because I don't know if you're not paying attention, but the main thing is, let's think about this when we think about the APUSH DBQ rubric, okay? And if you just type that in, you can see my rubric. But before we look at that, let's do a little a little Whig party free. What do y'all think? Just a little Whig party free, just to practice for tomorrow. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get this going, and let's see. So okay, let me get that instrumental going. And then we'll do a little DBQ. I want to do that. Great. WHIG Whig Party Free. That means I ain't got to worry about you. Do I Henry? I got my BETO pen in my hand, and I'm using it to show you ratchet legislation. I'm WHIG Whig Party Free. That means I ain't got to worry about you. Do I Henry? I got my SEOILs in my hand, and I'm giving all the jobs to all my Democrat friends. Veto. Gotta kill the bank before it kills. With some old hickory, the New Orleans hero. You can catch me stopping traffic on the main still road. More power to the common man, democracy. Gold said I lost in 24. Nah, Henry Clayton stole. I be cutting off the bank like standing up for state rights. The cartoonists draw me like a king. That means they steer right. Veto in the summer, in the winter, in out every night. Put that U.S. bank better. Good night. To the victor go the spoils just as they should. Try and override me, wishing that a Whig would. I don't want your paper money. Species still good. Be gotta kill the bank before it kills. I'm WHIG Whig Party Free. Back in 9, gotta worry about you. I got the BEDO pen in my hand, and I'm using it to show your ratchet legislation. I'm WHIG Whig Party Free. That means I ain't gotta worry about you. Do I Henry? I got the SEOILs in my hand, and I'm giving all the jobs to all my Democrat friends. Kill the bank. What's how you like the states' rights? Kill the bank. What's how you like the states' rights? Kill the bank. What's how you like the states' rights? Kill the bank. What's all right, ladies and gentlemen. Looking forward to our night before review tomorrow. Now, tomorrow night, all topics are going to be up for grabs. Okay, so basically, as far as that goes, tomorrow night's review session is going to be decided. Okay, is going to be decided by what y'all are putting in the chat. Okay, so those of y'all in the crowdcast, you want to make sure you get your questions in. We get them upvoted, because I don't have any kind of format tomorrow except for answering the questions y'all want answered. Okay, but as far as that goes, yeah, Whigs versus Democrats, we did that on the wrap there, and we talked about that last night too. Those of you who questions about Whigs versus Democrats, make sure you look at the thing we did last night. Now, as far as the DBQ, ladies and gentlemen, now the thesis, easy point to earn. Okay, as long as so what I would be asking is how to write a thesis. Okay, that's something you want to make sure you get that. 80% of students get that point. Okay, now here is the kicker. Accurately describes the content of at least 3 documents. Now, if you want to get this point, I would suggest 4, because remember, 3 documents have to be described accurately. Always hedge your bets a little bit. Okay, make sure that you are, I would never encourage someone to write an essay with at least four, without 4 documents. Okay, 4 documents I'd say is the bare minimum. If you want to get this point or this point, I would say this point here, I would say 5. I think that the best thing to do using 5 documents allows you to cut out the 2 documents that you find to be confusing or you just can't figure out how they're relevant or how to use them. I think that the 5 document DBQ is a good strategy. Now, the other side of that is HIP analysis. Again, that the majority of people who take the test do not earn this point. 90% of the people who take the test don't earn this point, okay? And if you're still asking about it, I'm telling you, I would say 95% of the people who earn these points, they're not people who were asking how to earn them during exam week. They're people who have been practicing. Because with my students, I work with them on HIP analysis over and over again during the year. I coach them through it. They get better at it. This is not something, it's like, don't try it, Anakin, kind of thing, sort of thing. So this is the high ground here. This is the high ground. Okay. Now, remember that the evidence beyond the documents is usually pretty easy because on just about every DBQ, they leave out something obvious. Okay. They do it on purpose. Like every DBQ that's written, they leave out at least like 2 different things. Like, for example, there was one they did back in 2009 where it was about African Americans in the Civil War, and there was not a word about the Emancipation Proclamation. They intentionally left the biggest piece of evidence out of the documents. Now, I always say write for 2 sentences about your outside evidence. Make sure you elaborate. You can't just name drop, okay? So with that, with the Emancipation Proclamation, don't just mention that it happened. Mention that Lincoln did this after hesitating for a couple years. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed slaves in Confederate-held territories, okay? And so as far as that goes, that this is something that it's got to be different. Now, evidence beyond the documents, contextualization. I usually recommend, just to be on the safe side, 2 to 3 content-rich sentences that give us some background. So if the DBQ's on Reconstruction, the Civil War, tell us a little bit about the Civil War in a way that sets the stage for Reconstruction. If it's about the Civil War, let's think about going back to the 1850s, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the Free Soilers. If it's about Manifest Destiny, maybe the Louisiana Purchase, which started this process of Manifest Destiny, you see? So easy points, thesis, accurately describes, evidence beyond the documents. From there, I would go to our intermediate points, contextualization, which depending on the DBQ, sometimes this is easier than others. Contextualization point, and supporting the documents, basically, you're starting your body paragraphs with a topic sentence, and your documents are used in a way that obviously supports a claim that you've made in an organized essay. A lot of people can't do that. But then these 2 points, this is like in a football game going for a 2-point conversion. People generally don't do it. It's extremely risky, right? So in order to pass the exam, like if you get the thesis, and you accurately describe more than 3 documents, and you get the evidence beyond the documents point. If you don't pass the exam, it won't be because your DBQ wasn't good enough. Now, if you can throw in contextualization, or you're somebody who can write an organized, argument-driven essay, I would urge you, ladies and gentlemen, take your scratch paper. You're taking this exam on a screen. The DBQ wasn't meant to be done on a screen. Now, if you can use your screen for scratch paper, like you're typing notes, what I do is when I'm reading the documents, I summarize the documents as if, I just kind of think about it, and I'll summarize the documents. I'll type while I'm reading them, and I won't quote. Remember, when we quote, we can't demonstrate understandings. Okay. So as far as that goes, I see what you did there, Gavin. So with that, and I'm going to do some Instagram shout outs on the way out, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to be going pretty soon. Okay. As far as that goes, we're going to be getting into some things, but thank you. We've got Paul Winston too, and Rafia Manzor. We've got some folks here. All right. So as far as that goes, thanks for the recent, Instagram follows. And remember, I've got a picture of Harambe, which I hear that double tapping a picture of Harambe can bring up your AP score by 2 points. So there's a picture on there on my Instagram, at Tom Richey. There is not. You know what? I've thought about contacting the publisher and asking them if I could write a book like that. That's because I think there should be one. I may, I'm just kind of wondering. So as far as that goes, can we give a shout out to Don Ho? We can give a shout out to Don Ho. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to go over to the multiple choice strategy session. If you go to crowdcast.io/Tom Richey, you can join the multiple choice strategy session, which is, sponsored by my friends at Albert.io. It's going to be a free session. Now, on the way out, let me remind y'all that I have a free practice exam. Okay, I have a free practice exam that is available, multiple choice at least. Okay, if you just Google Tom Richey free practice APUSH exam, you'll go to Albert.io. Now it is free. I'm gonna remind y'all, if y'all get to something where it's trying to charge y'all for something, you went the wrong way, you pressed the wrong button somewhere, okay? So, when you go there, you can go, it'll show you here, and they've even got, I think they've got a little instructional video there, yeah. So they've got an instructional video on how to access it, okay? So that's something we want to make sure that y'all take advantage of. It is a free 55-question multiple choice test that has answer explanations and all that stuff. Albert, it's a digital exam, so you're getting that digital experience, right? So you're getting the digital experience with an elimination tool and all of that stuff, okay? So we want to make sure it's there on Albert.io, and it is completely free. And I'm about to, to go and drop knowledge on y'all when it comes to the multiple choice section, which is 40% of your score. It is the most important section. And I'll see what happens. I tell you what, I would if Don Ho gave me his app, I'd follow Don Ho. I tell you what, I'd follow Don Ho. What about y'all? So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Aubrey, Shamini, and Angel, and Coach Rarely Play underscores there, Mariah, Nick G 611. I would say that that would be something that I would note there. Oh, got a Lana Del Rey fan. How about that? So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, we got Bray and Kadri and Truly Skyland. Thank y'all so much for the TikTok follows, and I'll see if I can turn that little manifest destiny thing that I was working on. I'll see if I can turn that into something. Okay. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, where is that? Okay. So it's, he doesn't use it anymore. Okay. You got to find him on it. Oh no, that would be an inappropriate joke. I'm not. Okay, I am a teacher. I'm not going to make an inappropriate joke. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and close it out. And again, I'm going to head over to the multiple choice strategy session, and let's just sing our way out of this. And I'll see y'all at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening for our last live of the season. All right, Eminem in the, oh my goodness, Gianna, that is Gianna. You follow it on Instagram and TikTok. I'm going to be there doing some more of this stuff. Mr. Blatt's APUSH class. Okay, Mr. Blatt's APUSH class. Thank you so much for your support. All right, glad to see that. So let's go ahead and sing our way out of here. I'm going to run to the multiple choice strategy session. If somebody will go to the multiple choice strategy session and let them know Tom's coming, Tom's on his way, he's wrapping up another session, that would make me so happy. Thank you. What's the worst that I could say? Things are better if I stay. So long and good night. So long and good night. If Don Ho carries on this way, things are better if I stay. So long and good night. So long and good night. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is always a pleasure.